afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our second day of Common Uncertainty. For those who couldn't attend yesterday, remember that the streaming is available on the YouTube channel of COECTFE, Arquitectos Tenerife. As stated yesterday, it seems that a year after Biennale, how will we live together is even more relevant. So we have to revisit and re-evaluate our responses to Hashim Sarkis. Their relevance, their evolution, the progress they have reached over the past year. We must name that in the end, nor Wael Alwar nor Alexander Furunes can join today. So we will have just 4 speakers this afternoon. We will continue with the same schedule. It's going to be 4 presentations, followed by a 25-minute coffee break, and then we've got a round table. So without further ado, our first speaker of the day is Sergio Sebastian. Sergio holds a PhD in architecture and teaches at the University of Zaragoza. He is also the founder of his own firm, practicing an architecture understood as a very wide and flexible concept, which has to give answers to different scales and objectives, focusing in areas such as landscape, urbanism, building construction, restoration, industrial design, graphical design, and museography. He is currently developing several studies for the recovery of the Camino de Santiago in Aragon and the enhancement of various scattered and neglected heritage sites in various towns along its route. He has been awarded with several prizes, as Domus Restauro e Conservazione Gold Medal, Arquitectura con ñ, Triennale di Milano, and more recently, the Hispania Nostra Award 2021. Between the fields of art and architecture, he has been developing artistic lighting pieces since 2004. And one of these projects was featured in the Spanish pavilion, Campanas, bells. So please, Sergio, you will join us.
I feel like Madonna with this. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, thank you. Thank you to Sofia, André, Fernando, and Domingo for giving me the opportunity to share our project here, and of course to share good moments for that fantastic adventure you have been rolling in for these 2 years. I wait to hear from you soon with fantastic adventures also. Thanks to the College of Architects and the Ministry, of course. Well, of course, thanks to all of you for your attention and your fantastic ideas we saw yesterday. I'm going to speak about campanas, as Sofia said. Don't worry, this is not a corporate presentation. It's only a question about my way to understand the architecture. As Sofia said, I think every generation has its own uncertainty. When I finished my career, I found an architectural world full of opportunities, projects, competitions. Suddenly, a terrible crisis transformed everything. And we need to rethink about what architecture means for us. I founded my own office in Zaragoza, and probably it's a question about curiosity, but I think that we should explore all the limits of the architecture. I have no necessity to give up the idea of architecture. I like my profession. I love my profession. So I would try to expand the horizons of that. So that is the question where we work in restoration, in housing, in several things. One of them is lighting design for ephemeral installations, especially for Christmas lights. I'm going to show one of these projects today. This is confetti. This is the first installation we made. It's not only a project, I think it's something like a strategy. Working in large scale demands a big budget, big sizes, and of course, big time. I make always the same question: is it possible to intervene in the large scale with small interventions, like catalyzers that could transform the large scale with these small kind of pieces? Confetti was that idea. Confetti also was a system of pieces of plastic that transformed the square in Madrid, this square in Madrid, into a carpet of colors, full of happiness in a moment after a terrible terrorist attack in that period. And we want to fool the city of happiness. Of course, it takes advantage of the most powerful font of energy and light we have, the sun. After that, we make this installation, guirnaldas, garlands. The idea was to interact with people, with the city. It was something like the pulse of the city, like the heart. The movement of people below transformed into light impulses. And so when the square was calm, the lamp was calm, and when the square was full of people, this was like something like a discotheque. We try to interact with light, not only like a decoration, but a system of communication. The other idea we try to implement with this installation, campanadas, was chimes, not campanas. Chimes. This clock is the most, I think, the most famous clock in Spain, but we only use it for one night, the New Year's night. I think here in Canary Island, no, but in the rest of Spain, yes. We transform the echoes of this clock into light impulses in the most visited street in Spain, Preciados Street in Madrid. We try to generate this idea of the event, this icon resounding in all the whole city. With this idea of the icon, we developed also this installation, Bauhaus. It was a tribute to the centenary of Bauhaus, with these drawings, fantastic drawings of Feininger into the manifesto. And this idea of the icon was also developed in this installation, where we also thinking to get into these installations. This was a tribute to Santiago Ramón y Cajal, a Nobel Prize from Spain that discovered the neuronal theory. And we transformed this tree into light impulses like a neuronal system. Of course, we have the fount of life below this tree, this life tree that, like a heart, give impulses to this tree. With this background, we were commissioned to design campanas in Sant Cugat del Vallès. Sant Cugat del Vallès is a city close to Barcelona. It's a so dynamical and young city, full of young people and of course, children. This was the space where we have to install this lighting design. The square of Tavia in front of the monastery is a so complicated space because it's full of activities, shops and temporary shops, trees. It's forbidden to hang things over facades because heritage matters. So we try to avoid. We have to generate surprise. We have to generate something that was interesting. So we need to avoid all this activity of the square and to produce something that causes you some surprise. That was the main idea. I think in our society we need surprise to live. I can show you a lot of elevated references about crossing a structure and discover a world, in this case the sky above. But this reference word direct. In one of the visits for the revision the project, I discovered these works of construction of the Sacred Familia in Barcelona. It was a space completely full of tourists, and the experience of the visit was not complete. You need the calm to see the building. I discovered that if you look up, only the action to look up was the mechanism to forget all the people that surrounded you. So we applied that system here. We transformed these installations into a simple action to look up, to look to the sky and forget the rest. Started the project with, as you see, with analogical systems. It's the way we work in the office, and of course, after all the structural systems, the designs, we tried the design to be something attractive also for all the people. No? It's something like a play. And these structures landed into the square. There was something interesting. This is temporary, so we have some licenses that are not into fixed architecture or permanent architecture, but we try to implement some questions about the relationship with environment. In this case, the use of polished metal allows us to hide all the bell into the sky with these reflections of the exterior part of the bell. And in the interior, we have the possibility to build of this magic world of infinite reflections inside. Of course, the interaction, as we see before, was something important for us. And the most important thing was the capacity to congregate people under. Historically, bells has been creators of certainties, I think. In our city, we have one bell, the bell of the lost people. We'll translate. It was a bell that was used for help people to return the city when the fog covers all the valley, with this sound. We try to build these bells with all the difference of the people, all the imagination, the surprise, the happiness of these people, make resound these bells. The bells now are not made by the foundation of ancient canyons, but with the difference of the people. The world people, we think it has to be, of course, accessible for everyone. We designed 3 bells. In this case, the first one was a kaleidoscope with the reflections of all the people below. The second bell was a rosette, the rosette of the monastery that was recently restored. We make it in colors, lights, and transform. Of course, using the installation by day is so important for us not to do that by day. And the third one was something interactive, was a musical instrument, a xylophone, that was activated with the movement of people, of children. It was really fantastic to see people and moving behind and sounding and producing this kind of effects. Well, this was bells. After that, we were selected to be part of the Bienal Venecia with this pavilion, Uncertainty. It was really an opportunity to change ideas with people that probably think the same way of us. It was an opportunity. Unfortunately, pandemic transformed everything again. And we were commissioned to design a model to resume our project. So we decided to transform the idea of the project. This was not a bell hung out over the floor. It was transformed in the way that our life was transformed in that moment. We were isolated. We were living in our capsule, and the relationship with people was something in distance, covering from filters, different filters, and so we produced this idea of the third veil over the floor, isolating this menina, this Princess Margarita as the symbol of Spain, and transforming it into something like a hologram, something virtual, where you have to see through different filters. Also, the idea to build this model with current objects, something we have close to us in our domestic sense. After Bienal. Bienal didn't open us so many doors, but it was easy for us to open some doors. We were commissioned to design more installations with this idea, the idea of the structure, and you can put inside or customize inside with different kinds of installation designed with people, collectives, and transform like your mobile phone, this installation each day. So we were commissioned to design something like a diffuse museum in the city of Zaragoza. And after, we have a proposal from a country not successful, because 2 days after we sent our contract signed, this country invaded Ukraine. The city was Moscow, so we have no answer of this proposal, but it was interesting. Everything had changed again. Pandemic transform our idea about this kind of installations. We designed this installation in Zaragoza after. This installation was called Broken Stars. It was a tribute to people disappeared by COVID-19. Every piece of this star was a person. Most important, we try to open the installations to public spaces, not to congregate people, but to invade. In this case, the biggest street of the city. And another question, we start to play with nature, with environment. In this case, with the fog of this city, almost a constant in the winter. We introduce also these northern lines into the city with this idea of the mix of nature into the city. And this was our last installation this winter. It's called Concha Shell in the bay of the Concha in San Sebastian. It's a fantastic place to work in this question of limit between nature and city, between artificial and natural. In this context, full of art, with Chillida, Oteiza, Cristina Iglesias, we try to draw something simple, something that everybody calls or speak about La Concha, but nobody has drawn before. We draw it with these lasers of 2,000 kilometers to transform the city for these days. I would like to finish with 4 images and 1 reflection. After that, we think it was a really important question to speak about how we will live together, but to answer that, I think we have to ask also, how did we live together? This was the installation of Preciados chimes. This is Preciados, this is the most visited street in Spain. And we live as this, we produce architecture for this, for the crowd, for the all people. The media invaded everything, our way to show the architecture, the installations, of course, the mediatic repercussion of this kind of projects of light for the event, for something that doesn't appear every day. But suddenly we had to work in this place. This is an abandoned city. We have to put light in a place where we have no light. More than light, we have to put life here. This was at the same time that Concha. I would like to bring these images for this reflection, final reflection, about how we will live together. We started to restore some heritage abandoned by the construction of this dam you see at the end of the photo, with this territory completely abandoned in 1960. But nowadays the life comes with the road to Santiago, this small road you see in the image. 6 or 7 people cross all this territory every day. And when they cross Resta has only one inhabitant. We try to consolidate all these structures, all these remains, the ruins, and try to think in how the architecture will provide these scenarios for the future. We didn't want it to abandon this to the ruin, but we tried to transform in a new scenario to live, completely different to the projects you see before. Always think for the crowd, and we think in other ways to occupy this space, to habit this kind of space. We designed a camping into the ruins, and we try to think in what does it mean to live together tomorrow. As architects, I think we have to provide the furniture probably for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio. It was really nice. Thank you. Ana Monviedro is an enthusiastic architect, teacher and researcher. She graduated from CEU Architecture School in Spain in 2014. But she actually finished her architecture training at Aalto University in Finland. There she worked designing learning environments and started her research about neuroarchitecture. Between 2014 and 2016, she did her training in neuroscience and perception at Duke University, where she was interdisciplinary teacher at Colgate University in New York. Nowadays, she combines her research with her job as a neuroarchitecture teacher. Her project, Playing Space, done together with Sara San Gregorio and Alicia Gutierrez, was the result of the fusion of her knowledge in neuroscience and perception, product design and architectural needs in a public building in Madrid. Thanks to Jugar el Espacio, Ana evolved her creation method, and she's currently working on designing an architecture language which shows how we feel the space. It's with this project that she was featured in the Spanish Pavilion. Please.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for welcoming me. And I'm really happy to be here today talking to you about this project that I actually bought. So afterwards, if you want to play around with it, that's what you're supposed to do with this, playing, okay? This project wasn't done only by myself. I'm going to be talking about this all the time because I think it's extremely important that I always work with other people. Otherwise, my research makes no sense, okay? So, first of all, I forgot my notebook. Well, it's okay. It's all right. I'm going to show it to you, this picture. Do you know what this is? You're all familiar with this, right? It's a cathedral. I think it's Amiens Cathedral, if I'm not wrong. When we have a look, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Because I want to read you a text. I know it by heart, but I would never say it by heart. When I start my conferences that I usually give, I always read this text that I read in 2009, and it changed completely my vision of architecture. And it says like this: if you enter the cathedral in Amiens at twilight while an organ is playing and find that your heart skips a beat, it's because your brain, not your heart, has filled you with awe. Cells in your brains are gorging themselves with a sudden flush of blood, raising your temperature, quickening your pulse, and flooding you with memories. Light flooding through stained glass windows is stimulating the V4 area of your visual cortex. Bach's music is vibrating within the cochlea of your inner ear and sending signals to the auditory cortex. The musty smells of centuries pass register unconsciously on the olfactory neurons at the bridge of your nose. You're experiencing architecture. So when I read this text in 2009, written by John Paul Everhart, who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, I was studying architecture, and I said, hey guys, this is what architecture is about. It's not about building, it's about sensing and experiencing. But at school, they were not explaining us how this experience happened. Okay, so that's when my research started, what I was studying. Nowadays, I have moved forward quite a lot after so many years of reading and doing this sort of things. I just actually published the first book totally about neuroarchitecture, and it's not magic, it's what everyone does, but I'm trying to explain how the built space, how to build atmosphere, how architecture turns into stimuli which goes to our organs, and from our organs go to our sensory system, and how our sensory system works with all the sensory information and produces emotions and produces sensation of the space, okay? I think all architect, designer, and users of architecture should know about this. That's why I published the book, okay? So this is so you have a bit of a context, but I'm gonna go straight deep into the project that was exposed in the Biennale Pavilion in Venice that you may have seen, and it's the actual project is called Playing Space, but it's got 3 parts: playing surface, playing volume, and playing with light. This one is playing with light, all right? And what happened was that when we arrived to this solution using 2 kinds of design parameters. We used phenomenological parameters, which are related to what happens when you interact with an object, and atmospherical parameters, which are the sensations that are, characteristic of every different space. So why your body knows that you're in a cathedral and you're not by the sea, for instance, okay? So like all the research I work with, I usually call, hey, we've got a problem here. Come, have a look, go to hypothesis, and prove it with a project. So in this case, the hypothesis had 3 different sections. First of all was that the game keeps a close relationship with the playing environment. Second was that this link is based on sensory parameters. And the third one was that if we change these parameters, these atmospherical parameters, the game and the play will change as well, okay? So I will explain you briefly in the next slides. I was facing a problem, and my idea was that this was happening. And through a project, we would prove that this was right, okay? Very often it happens that people tell me, of course, Hannah, yeah, the game keeps a close relationship with a playing environment. And I say, yeah, but how do you prove that, So we prove this with this. So we use architecture to prove theory, okay? Do you guys understand? Because everyone, I'm used to teach and I like interaction, but I cannot be making questions because we've got no time. Okay, so as I was telling you, playing the surface, playing with volume, playing with light, okay? I call this the perception funnel, okay? Because our perception and the stimuli that we get they decrease. They're different and they're smaller as we change the environment of these 3 playing spaces. This was possible thanks to Sara Sangregorio, who is an actual toy designer. She produces and designs toys. Alicia Gutierrez, who is an expert on ephemeral architecture. She's the one that brought us this beautiful, colorful material, okay? Before Alicia, this material wasn't like this. And myself, I'm the one who is interested in neuroscience and perception, like, already, because I just told you, okay? Okay, so I'm going to tell you briefly, like a timeline, what happened. And what happened was that Sara was at Media Lab Prado in Madrid, and she was producing toys. And the kids would go there, use the toys, play around, shout, how kids behave, right? And the people who were running the space, they were kind of angry, like, hey, Sara, your toys, they're not welcome, because look at this, it's a mess. So you got to do something or we will remove the toys. And then Sarah said, Anna, please come here, help me. What can we do? How can we change the behavior of the kids with the toys? And I said, okay, don't worry, we will team up. I was there for several weeks. We were having, hypothesis, everything I just told you, and we designed Playing Space. Playing Space had 2 different sections. There was a research, which I brought and which I was developing based on studying and papers and, what homoludens, but, loads of bibliography and stuff. But at the same time, Sarah was in action. She was actually performing the things I was doing with theory, okay? The action was based on these 3 different things that I already explained you, the 3 different workshops. At the end, there were 100 workshops she's got. And I was writing papers, doing workshops, proving that this was actually happening, because I still can't believe it, I do it with my kids. I mean, are they going to be quiet now if I do this? And they are. I'm like, oh my God, this is magical, But no, it's not. It's, it's how the body works. So I was working on the workshops, and I designed a methodology. So this project helped me understand how to use neuroscience to produce architecture. So, sorry, I'm very happy, but because it took me so many years to get here. And then when I was called, I think Domingo gave me a call, and he was like, hey, we are going to do the pavilion, and we like your work. Would you like to bring something? And then I was like, well, I have nothing, And he was like, no, you've got a lot of stuff. We've seen it. And I said, I've got things, but with other people. So then is when we called Alicia, and we said, Alicia, we're going to bring this object to the Biennale, and you've got this amazing material. Why don't you join and we do it a little bit better, okay? So that was in 2019. As you can imagine, so many things were happening and many ideas were coming up. And since we're very hectic women, the 3 of us with kids, many things have, pop up. One of them was Menudas Piezas, which is a store, an online store where people could actually buy these items. And they have reached so many homes and schools, and actually they have run out of pieces, and they're not going to produce more. So I have the latest ones with me right now. But we're very happy because this has given us an opportunity to grow and to continue, okay? So they have developed this more. Apart from Menudas Piezas, Sarah and I realized, I had this, my theoretical framework with my methodology, and she had this set of workshops that she was doing at schools. And Sarah created, it's a shame, this is a beautiful image. I don't know why can't we see it, but you'll see it later. It's called Juguetería, which is a factory of toys that goes from one place to another, and she helps kids and families and people who are curious about toys how to design and create their own toys. So it's a toy factory. And I created Qualia, which is my architecture studio. So in Qualia Studio, we use research, and I teach about my research to other architects to produce architecture. So it's it makes sense, I'm finally using research to produce something. Because when I was working on my PhD, I was very frustrated that I was researching and researching. What for? To print books and give talks, but this needs to be landed somewhere. So that's what Qualia is doing at the moment. So I said, it's a shame that we cannot see it. I'll share it with you later on. Sarah's work, Juguetería, you see there, what she's doing essentially, and this is how we're living together. So we're giving an answer to the question of the Biennale. So Sarah is bringing joy and knowledge through design to the kids. So she's using architecture as a teaching and learning method in many places. She has a portable toy factory, and she visits museums and schools, and they produce hundreds and thousands of toys. And in my case, I'm sharing knowledge through experience. So for instance, this is a picture in a workshop I did in Barcelona, and these are all architects and designers, and I was explaining them how taste and smell works. So we were eating with our vision. And I was, so they could understand how important all the senses are when you're experiencing in space. And we do it through these different kinds of experiences. I also speak about the brain and the neurons and all that, but I think this is the coolest things. And we do it remotely and we do it in person, both things. I'm almost about to finish, and I would like to finish with this idea that Playing Space is a living project. I haven't mentioned the dates, but you've probably seen it in the diagram that I shared. We started, when was it, like 2016, when there was this problem in Media Lab, and still nowadays, Sarah and I, actually I saw her yesterday, we talk about the things we're doing and we're evolving them from what we're learning. So, although it was born through or from an architectural need, because when I was called, they were like, we have to build a playground. You know, very often people tell me, Anna, design us a playground. And I said, no, I'm going to camp in that spot for a week, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to speak with the people who are there, and we will see if a playground is what's needed. Usually it's not a playground. So we use, or I use, research on pedagogy, on neuroscience, on psychology, many other fields to nurture, to feed the architectural design. And I do this thanks to other professionals, of course. I cannot do it on my own. And this sort of interactions have led to many enriching projects, and it has helped us build a conscious community. And it's an all ages learning individuals. So, and this is something, my book is actually called Neuroarchitecture, Learning Through Space, because we're always learning faster or slower or with more or less emotions. But learning is something that is always with us. So the space has to provide the proper atmosphere to remember, to have social interaction, to have privacy, and that's all based on learning. So I think that play and joy and happiness, all that is, those are the real foundations of architecture, and this project is a sample of that. So this is everything from me now. I thank you very much for sharing my approach to neuroscience in architecture, and I really hope we have the chance to talk later, because I would like to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. It was really enlightening. Okay, so the third speaker today is Ignatius Barnabas. He studied architecture at the University of Bath and completed his education at the Bartlett School of Architecture. He has worked for different offices in Tokyo, in Vienna, and for example, for Will Alsop in London. Currently, he is an undergraduate design tutor at the University of Westminster. Together with Ira Savides, he founded Urban Radicals, a design collective which operates at the intersection of multiple disciplines, exploring public space and the notion of collectivity across a variety of scales, contexts, and design expressions. The studio has grown organically through projects, competitions, parties, dinners, fishing trips, gardening, stories, painting, cooking, workshops, walks, gatherings, and conversations. In 2019, they won the competition to curate and design the Cyprus Pavilion at the Biennale with the proposal Anachoresis. Please, Ignatius, if you may.
Thank you. Where am I? Sophia? Which one? Ah, okay. Sorry. Okay. I think I need to sit down. Yep. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me here. I wish Ira could be here as well, because I feel like I'm going with one wheel. But yeah, it's been an honor to design and curate the Cyprus Pavilion. The project started as a collaboration with independent art curator Seva Orazonezis and Marina Christodoulidou. And it developed to a very site-specific project, as the ministry in Cyprus commissioned this quite late. So we tried to respond to a very tight time frame. We've been to Tenerife before to see the works of local architects here. We really are interested in the island because we come from an island. And this was in 2017. We really enjoyed it. We came to see architecture, but actually we were really amazed by the topography, the landscape, and this kind of micrographies that this island holds. And we felt very close to home with this kind of ideas of DIY-ness and the festivals, and something that makes us feel rooted in place, even though these lights might be confusing. It's something that we relate to and something that we immediately connected with. So back to the project. Anachoresis is a term that was explored by Roland Barthes in a book called How to Live Together. We looked into it as a concept, but also we were interested in the idea of like reframing space, distancing, and how it relates to both to social and spatial concepts. This was the installation. We worked within an existing space in Spiazzi. It's outside the main exhibition of the Biennale. Cyprus does not commission a space in the Giardini or the Arsenale. So we really wanted to work with that space, and we designed something very site-specific with that. There is a series of rooms, and we treated the project as a series of rooms to design the exhibition. And created this continuous surface, a table, and we really envisioned a place for gathering where people could congregate. And even though it was designed during COVID, we kind of elongated the typology and placed people at a distance. We also decided to have an open call and invited basically 12 other young emerging architects to contribute to this circular typology of the table, who everyone kind of explored the idea of domesticity and interiority and landscapes. So, but the very interesting thing is that Cypriots are kind of scattered around the world, and there were collaborations between Cypriots and someone from Puerto Rico, and it really tells a lot about our generation and how we work together. So, this is the existing space in Spiazzi. We looked at it as a sequence of 3 rooms, room 1, the courtyard, and room 2 at the back. And even though like the plan kind of entails to a static exhibition, like something that collects a series of objects as an archive and relates to a way of looking at it as an architecture exhibition, we really wanted it to take a more active form, which you might see later. This was the first concept sketch. We talk a lot with Ira and the way we work, but we tried to distill an idea, and the sketch basically looked into highlighting ways of gathering, bringing people together, and the different pieces. So the idea of fracturing, but also keeping it together as one form, as one flow. At that point, there was really nothing on the surface, so it was just about the gesture and how we treat the existing space. But we left it quite open because we wanted to inhabit this surface. We wanted to bring other ideas in, other multiple perspectives from other people, and we also wanted to explore a series of thematics that we did with the objects that we selected to display. During the pandemic, we were living in a tiny flat in London, and Ira was very on it to move back to Cyprus, where we have a larger house by the beach. And I mean, this really helped us to kind of reconnect to Cyprus, because we studied abroad. We've been living in London for 15 years, and we were kind of removed from Cyprus as a context. But it really going back, it really helped us to understand the different scales that you might come across in the city. So this is from Nicosia Town Hall. It's a very recent construction site where you have the ancient scale of the ancient ruins. You have this kind of infrastructural scale of the building, and you have this DIY thing that you see in Cyprus, and also what I look at when I walk around in Tenerife. So this idea of these three different scales that we were interested in, and especially the domestic, something that it's built up by people and not by architects. As a working method, because we were working with non-architects, we decided to make this model, and it was the sharing moment where ideas and exchange, and working with post-it notes, and sometimes we had conclusions, a lot of the times we didn't, but it was a great way to communicate and understand different perspectives and kind of think how to inhabit this surface. So the whole project and the plan that you saw, we wanted to kind of unpack it as a three-dimensional project and not a 2D surface with display elements. So again, it was again one of our first projects, so we want to explore the idea of architecture in the project as well. So in the sequencing of this diagram, we looked into the concept of piling and setting up a clear structural plan and setting the rhythm in the construction, but also in the way someone might experience it with these legs that I'm going to talk about now. In the meantime, we were doing research with the pigments from different landscapes of Cyprus, because it has a really rich landscape like here. We were trying to do castings, but obviously, like with COVID and transport, we couldn't do it. We did some prototypes, but we worked with some people to develop these materials for us, and based on the color palette and the different pigments of the island. We went around and collected all this I don't know, volcanic rocks, iron oxides, coppers, and it was amazing to re-engage with the landscape through the eyes of the architect, which is the first time we actually did it after we went to study abroad. We met some very interesting people. We created these mud bricks with them, which are displayed in the pavilion, and we really wanted to celebrate the different places in Cyprus purely as landscapes. This is an ancient proto-settlement. It's one of the most ancient in the Mediterranean. It's called Hierokitia, and they used to build circularly, and a series of rooms were interconnected to a bigger gathering space. So it's something that we were interested in. So if you look at the plan and the idea of the piling and the way the geometry kind of flows, we tried to kind of respond to that. On the second level, there's the idea of the leveling and connecting the surfaces and going back to the concept sketch to bring people together. And also we looked into concepts of proxemics, the idea of distancing, and also highlighting it. So cutting the surface, so it's quite obvious what we're trying to achieve. Some diagrams to communicate with the public, hopefully what we were trying to do, and the idea of spacing the 2 meters. And we had these interactive elements in the pavilion, so we imagined them as big doors, because we weren't sure like how many people would come in, so we created this pivoting elements that we thought they would be these entrance devices and would pace people to enter and exit. And of course, on the third level, it's the objects that give basically expand our thematics. We looked into the idea of concepts of play, infrastructure, landscapes. A lot of these plans that you see in Cypriot folk, language. They're considered to be completely native, but there's plants that have been imported from around the Levant area, the Mediterranean, so it's we're not quite sure what's local or not, but we found that very interesting when we were looking at them. This is a picture from the Cyprus Handicraft Association, women working together. You see it also, you used to see it also back in the villages, and actually where Ira is from, it's the largest village where they produce the Venice lace. There's depictions of Leonardo da Vinci passing through Cyprus and being really interested in this lace, and kind of there's a big history for it, but what we found really interesting is how women created these cooperatives, and they worked in public spaces together. And so they generated their own like microeconomies without waiting for the men for the main income. Going back to ideas of craft, these objects, you can see them in houses in Cyprus, but they've become vestigial. So we were always interested between this idea of like, how do we look at the past? We look at these objects, but they're not really in use. But what's really interesting is how these were made, and they were generated, and they didn't really have an author. It's made by a lot of people, and the knowledge is passed from generation to generation, and it's something that we're interested to look into with our architecture and our proposal. So you can see the objects on the surface, which relate to craft, end clay, the backgammon, this clay vessel, the woman that used to make this, and the whole craft kind of died last year, actually, which is very sad, but it's and even the vegetation, the trees, lemons are considered something for the commons, for the people in Cyprus, so you see them planted in the streets. So we were trying to bring these micrographies as an archipelago on the table, as a representation for Cyprus and what it is. So how will we live together becomes how will we work together, and looking to the past and the real locality of our place. We opened up the pavilion, again during COVID, and distancing, so you see some people with masks. We wanted to create these events, and we were actually really lucky because Marco is a kind of resident chef in the space in Spiazzi, and he runs a place called Venezia. And he's from Venice. He used to work for Numa, and he came back and he does research on the Laguna and the products of the Laguna, and he only cooks for these events. And we organized a series of food events and shared with friends, which was really nice to see. So Spiazzi also inhabited the table by itself, the Cultural Foundation. They organized events themselves outside the Bienal exhibition, which is something that we really wanted to highlight, as the Cyprus Pavilion is not in the main architectural exhibition. So we wanted to give the people who own the space a place to still gather and create these events. We also opened it up to summer schools with EAA, again exploring the idea of gathering, sharing recipes. So we had people, again, online from India to Cyprus, Korea. They shared recipes, they scanned objects, and they worked with the chef and created this very interesting compositions. This is kind of the afterlife of the pavilion. So the people actually kept it in the space, and the fragments of it moved around, and they're still using it for their shop. So thank you. I also want to leave it here with the credits. Thanks for everyone who contributed. And there's a video, I don't know how much time we got, which talks about the main themes that we were trying to answer. And this was done as a sneak peek before, but I want to leave it here. Thank you.
Act or state or concept of separation from the world that is affected by going back to some isolated, private, secret, distant place. The habit of avoiding predators by living concealed in a hole, crevice, or some other retreat. Departure, to check out, to vacate, to take off. An abrupt jolt of departure. An abrupt retreat into the scale of the domestic. How do we live together? How do we piece relationships together? What are the spatial experiences that occur when distancing becomes a paradigm for the development of new socialities? How are we to transform a state of emergency into a site of emergence? How do individuals construct collectives? And how can we recreate frameworks within the architectural discipline for allowing multi-authored works and spaces for working, making, and living together? What emerges in the space between planned over-engineering and improvised social engineering?
Thank you. Thank you, Nasius. Brilliant. Okay, so for the last but not least speaker of the evening, we've got Wen Xing. She set up local design in Seoul in 2005. She has been a professor at the Korea National University of Arts and at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She has worked on architecture and urban infrastructure projects at a wide range of scales, as well as public projects and urban design research. Her work has been recognized through numerous awards, including like the Public Design Award in 2011, the Young Architect Award from the Korean Architects Institute, and the first prize in the European 5 competition. Local design has represented Korea at the 10th Venice Biennale 2006 and at the Shenzhen, Hong Kong V-City Biennale of Urbanism and Architecture. Nowadays, Wen is a professor in Monash University in Australia, and her project, Future School, was selected for the Korean Pavilion at Biennale in 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. I think this is such a moving moment because also especially for all the people who's been together curating in the Venice Biennale, we have actually envisioned for this kind of future school to happen. And yesterday's event and today's event, all the things I've been to, Cyprus Pavilion, Swiss and
in British pavilion and Spanish pavilion so many times, and I have, like, past 2 days, I've learned so much more through this event, and thank you so much for hosting this, Spanish pavilion curators. This is amazing. And yes, so I don't know how I can pack this future school, all this process, because this has been more than 2 and 3, almost 3 years of process of bringing people together. We have started this idea of the future school in 2019, where the idea came with bringing kind of the new time. That as architects, and I'm a practicing architect, but I was always also teaching. And we were actually dealing with all these aspects of current condition and social and global condition with something that was quite distant from practice and the reality and what was taught in school. Also, I was crazy enough to start a school that was completely kind of non-funded, and we started to see whether, like workshop, short time, that we can do something that was much more relevant to issues like climate crisis, refugees, diaspora, and of course to link that innovation aspect has to come in. So when I proposed this to the open call to the Korean Pavilion, they thought I was crazy, that why are you doing this in the Architecture Biennale? But of course, the overall theme, when it became the how we live together, I said the best way to address this is at really in education, but in a school. So in order to create a school, you have to bring in so many people together. We had more than 300 people and participating, and we were all participators of this Biennale, and I was really the facilitator to bringing all these amazing people together. Before we go into the programs, I wanted to kind of talk about the brief, and this is a drawing by Song-Yul and Christian, who we also all know from the Curators Collective. They were part of the Curators Collective, and this was, I think, the first time the Korean Pavilion has actually credited a designer to engage in collaborative working with me. The brief was that we're going to have, and this is before COVID, so we said it's going to be, we're going to just open a new day, a new school, in the Korean Pavilion, and we're going to talk about climate, and we're going to talk about all this migration and so on, and we're going to have both in Seoul and in Venice a simultaneous school running together. And of course there's people who are dealing with climate. They thought, okay, why do we all have to go to Venice? We could do it here online. It's going to be live streaming or Zoom, and because I kind of knew Zoom way before by coincidence. So, and this was all very new. People weren't used to this kind of Zooming and all this. So we thought this was a great idea, that everybody will be shocked by this kind of interactive way, and then everybody got so used to it that it became like we prepared for this pandemic. But we still had the both spaces. We had an opening, actually on the opening day, we couldn't fly to Venice, so we did it on site in Korea, and we had both spaces kind of working. Almost nothing really we didn't change much in the way. And Chris Rowe, who also worked with us, we had very colorful graphics, but it turned into, we decided to go kind of black and white. Architects love, and this is kind of the boards that we had in the Korean Pavilion. Because we had so many programs working together, we had to have a consistent kind of also graphic identity to bring everything together. So how can we be together and not be, so this kind of horizontal network of things and relationship had to be formed kind of simultaneously in graphics, in spatial design, in the designing of Anna Winston was helping with this cataloging and bringing kind of different aspects all together. And the important thing of this also, the Future School, was that we had to do this dialogue series where we call it a Generativity Dialogue. So by just having a dialogue with each other, which we are doing in a way here, with different subjects like hashtagging, unlearning, issues of technology, innovation, about difference, a meal together, environmental education systems, all these keywords. We had all these gatherings that people normally would not. So this is like me kind of making different parties every time, bringing people together. And these were all the programs, like more than 50 programs were running, even during the time before the opening of the Biennale until the end of the Biennale. So it didn't at the end matter where you were, because we were gathering kind of locally wherever you could gather, but also same time that we were using this technology of everybody being used to the Zoom. We had the orientation within ourselves. We couldn't all meet, and people did not know each other. So that was just before everybody were locked down. So when everybody had this orientation, thought, oh, this is very cool, then they had to all get used to it pretty soon. So from like local imaginaries, to archaeology of pedagogy, to play shop, where EPEC with the team had made at the end a children's book on climate crisis, so like a storyboard. And all these programs, they are not open call. They were kind of people who I had been in relations throughout my practice and my teaching. And so, of course, they would just text me and WhatsApp me. And it's kind of 3 in the morning now, but it's like globally running kind of 24 hours. At the same time, when the pandemic hit, curators decided to get together. That was happening at the same time. So this is really I think the first time I'm kind of reflecting on all these programs, and we have this programs now compiled into a book, not a book, but more like an archiving, and thought, wow, this is kind of a way of being together or doing something together, but not that it's uncontrollable. It has kind of, we're putting seeds for, or creating a platform for everybody to come, and we are more like curators or people who are delivering, this kind of the facility to make this happen. And at the end, all these programs that, for instance, this one artist who wanted to cook seaweed soup in the Korean pavilion, that was our opening kind of climate lunch, so it's dealing with food. And he now is sailing around like Russia and Korea, because he developed that kind of notion of climate with seaweed, and then sailing, and so everybody's kind of using this opportunity to further what they were working on. But what was really crucial for this to happen, because after the pandemic, we needed to have something working for everybody to know what's going on. So we have created this kind of interactive online. It's just like a Facebook type of thing. It's very easy to upload. And let me just have So with the help designed by Irun and Andrew, yes. So this is like a Netflix plus / Facebook that people could scroll like that. Oh, this is our Curators Collective meeting. So the video, and this is a kind of diagram of showing the network of different programs together working. So with this kind of lot of the video, the animation, films and videos, we had also what's happening now. So when everybody, the program directors had access and the students had access to upload contents, like what we do in Facebook, and then this gets shown. So this was a kind of online live platform. And this is not, like we didn't have that, bigger budget, so it was really using the existing method, kind of easy way to put kind of the idea together into interactive, more or less interactive website. And all these programs that were formed during this time, we had, I think, 300 people almost participating on this. So the Foundation Biennale, in their catalog, they could not fill in the names in our allocated pages. So we just said, look at the website. And one of the, also kind of all these things kind of breaking the rules, but in order to really think about how will we live together at this time in the future that we are creating at the moment, is in a way we don't, I'm not a radical person, but at the same time, you have to break the rules because somehow simple ideas kind of leads to a kind of radical action. So we had some kind of inter-Asia pop nights, all these different programs together, and you can actually go into these things to see what they are. Am I running? Why don't we have a timekeeping? Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes. Control L. Yes, so this is the Korean Pavilion that we had also the people who've been working there as managers for past 7-8 years. They were the Dawsons. They were part of the participants. So it's that the people who are running the school are also very important. And we could not, none of us could fly or be there. It was all remotely done. And the brief was not everything, anything that goes there doesn't come back. So materials was these kind of pavement materials, everything was locally put together, and then everything that we sent was given away to the people of Venice. And we had the round gathering space with this amazing carpet, which was designed by the landscape architect, and everything was to be functional, but of course the idea that the pavilion becomes a really used space. And of course during the pandemic it wasn't really, all the programs were not happening here, but at the same time the people who were really there during that time were using kind of as part of the owners and occupiers of the space. And this kitchen was used, and some of these items were also brought by the Korean restaurant startup people in Venice. So everything was given away locally. And you could only kind of imagine what was happening, not through words, but through these time and experiences, and what has then evolved, hopefully from this into incubating into something else. And these were things that were happening throughout the time that we were there. There was some staging, and you could see these interactive kind of conversations happening. Some are on site, some are somewhere else. We had an opening where I was just sitting behind the TV screen, and the reporters will come and we would have a conversation. So this all was compiled into a book which is automated, laid out, because we cannot do this by person. So Irun and Andrew, Irun Kang and Andrew Leclerc, they made this possible. And Curators Collective, yes, we are here, I think, by the whole point of the Biennale is really to engage with each other and to have the interactions with other curators and other exhibitors, and what we are doing today. My experience of the previous Biennale was I had participated as one of the exhibitors in 2006. We were too busy just doing our exhibit and then not knowing anybody there and coming back. And this Curators Collective, of course it happened due to the pandemic, where we had to really share what was going on and to support, but also we then led this all these curators together through meeting via Zoom. It's actually interesting that because it's Zoom, that it doesn't matter you have bigger pavilion or smaller pavilion, everyone gets the same screen size and being in the same platform. And we could also really kind of work on the process of how can we all gather in person. So we had a métissage happening in 2021 August, and this is kind of now the manifestation of this imagination that we could, I mean, no one thought that in the beginning that all these curators of the pavilions could gather and having conversation and really enjoy each other's company and become this kind of really this network of strong architects who are engaging in different parts of the world. So we have such a unique experience, and this, I think, is one of the beginning of collaboration and exchanges. And I hope this continues further on. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you. It was really beautiful. So please, everybody, join us in the lobby for a coffee break, and then we come back for the round table.
All right. Hi, guys. It was a huge pleasure to hear tonight, and you had some really brilliant exposés. My mind is still buzzing, so I'm not sure if I can ask you any clever questions. So I'll just try to start with something easy, at least for me. So I realized that the four of you are teachers, which is quite amazing here. And when I remember from my school, all of my teachers used to teach me about Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and Alvar Aalto, details, architecture stuff. And you don't seem as this kind of teachers. You're more, you seem like you're teaching from, also learning from other disciplines. You learn from gathering with people, from talking with people. And so you all seem like this kind of facilitators and coordinators or moderators of dialogue between people. And so I wanted to ask you if you believe that, is there any kind of limit for this kind of involvement of people, of user into the design? Like, how can we make people more engaged in the design of their own spaces? So this would be my first very open question for you. Who wants to start?
I'm a teacher, yes, but I'm also a learner, always, and all of us. But also a practicing architect, and I think we all are. And it's important to question, rather than knowing, like we know what is next, things to do, and so on. So, in that respect, I think this being kind of not forgetting that being when you are a student. So really looking from the perspective of a student rather than kind of superimposing from teacher's point of view only.
For me, taking the topic about your pavilion, uncertainty. Yesterday I was talking with Fernando Menis about what do we have to teach in the school to our architects about the question that we were speaking in the round table about the necessity of architects nowadays. It's difficult to teach now. I think we have to show not certainties. I was in Madrid. I remember I learned architecture in a certainty context, with Mies van der Rohe, with Le Corbusier, with the past. No? And now we have to show something more difficult, that is the future, but we don't know what is the future. I think an interesting method is, I try to make it every year, is to make the students forget the ground they are on. If you eliminate the ground they are on, if you eliminate the tools they have to build their own tools. I think it's the best way to prepare them for the future. We have no answers about the future. We have a lot of questions. So I think it's interesting to make a critical sense in the students about probably the future. They are the vanguard. No, better, they are the rear of the vanguard. No? So we can prepare them for the future if we can't make them doubt or adopt a critic position about.
Is this working? Okay. I think the way we are taught, again, it's very filtered through the communications of showing off one person, but a lot of the times there's a bigger structure around the person that goes at the front and receives credit. And I think it's important to embed this in education, that teaching design obviously is a personal exploration, but I think it could expand beyond and look further in the more kind of traditional norm of, yeah, here's an architect, this is what they did, they were very successful, and actually embed in education the concept of and the way of working together as other disciplines do, which I think it's very much lacking from our profession in education. And obviously, like after you graduate, you're in this strange situation where you were taught how to kind of be an individual, pin up as one person, but then in the practice brings you down to the ground and a lot of times hits you. That you have to understand that you need to be able to communicate with other people, negotiate with other people, and actually I think finding it much more fulfilling to work with other people. And I think our generation is shifting towards something more fulfilling to be working with the other and understanding the other. If this.
In my case, I am a teacher. I'm a high school teacher, and I teach English at high school. That's why my English is sort of good. But I also teach at architecture schools. And my perspective in both cases is that in the future, for my students, I'm not going to be there. So I always tell them, it's a bit dramatic actually, especially when I teach 12-year-old kids, you know, and I tell them, hey, you know what, something can happen to me and maybe tomorrow I'm not coming and you're not going to stop learning. So the perspective I've got of teaching is that they have to learn how to learn on their own. So they have to learn how to look for proper information and how to be critic, you know, try to be objective. So I always try to give them different methods to look for information. And that it doesn't matter what you're teaching. If you're teaching law or history or whatever, you have to be able to learn on your own. So maybe because I'm a mother as well, this is my perspective. I don't know if we answer your question, and I support what they said as well.
I think it was a very open question. So yes, you did answer it, but I also wanted to ask, how does it influence your practice, your architectural practice? How does it make you be better moderator of dialogue with users? You know, how does it make you better facilitators for this more democratized architecture nowadays? That was like the spirit behind the question.
I think that because what we learn in a traditional context in architecture school, but also I've been fortunate enough to also see the other side, which is more experimental. But in practice side, when you become more like an agent that leads and structure, so that you're not just operating with this fixed framework of what architects do. And this was a discussion we had also yesterday, that we see it being really part of the kind of larger society, but also we have to, in this generation, especially I'm experiencing that we have to really see it as a citizen in a planetary context, because none of these issues can be solved within that kind of more bounded regional. So both kind of locally and globally, that we have to experiment, and that kind of issues of failures, and by failing and not kind of also kind of respecting that process, and that it's not going to be an end process, but kind of open process of learning, resetting, and then also then expanding. And by our way of engaging kind of shows, oh, that's also possible, and we can't just adopt it and then kind of drop it onto, especially kind of Western education in this context of a very diverse cultural context. You can't just drop it and say, this is the textbook. So we have to really be creative in our own way of engaging with each conditions, I think. Of course, that kind of is also one of the ways that we're sharing like a platform in Biennale, where we see the very diverse way of engaging with this one theme of how we live together, and everybody had this amazing array of layers of how they see this topic.
absolutely. And I really like what you said about this diverse approach. And I wanted to ask like more a specific question, maybe to you, Anna, first of all. You're working in the neuroscience. Try to improve our sensorial experience. In your project, you always work with children, which usually are like the most extroverted person. Yeah, they create together. They start creating things together just seconds after a meeting. So my question was, do you think there's a way to design spaces that can trigger this kind of behavior between adults? Yeah, is there, in your experience, did you learn something from these interactions with kids that might be applied to architecture for adults and help us to design better spaces for all?
Okay. So when we talk about human beings, and this is maybe not the answer you're expecting, because I'm not giving you like a list of tips, although we could, but this would take forever. But a baby and a kid and an adult and a grown-up or the elderly are so different that they could be like a turtle, a lion, a cat, and a mouse. Okay, so they're totally different people, you know, and they interact in totally different ways because their brains are different, they work differently, and so on. So what I learned from the kids cannot be applied in adults because they're different, you know, different people. Nevertheless, I've worked with adults as well. And the thing is that the method to work with, it's not the same. I don't use the same methodology when I work with kids because they release information in a different way. Language works differently and they express themselves in a different way than when I work with adults. Now, adults, they have something that can be either like a good or a bad thing, but they have a background, they have experience, and they're biased by this experience. So you have to take that into account, okay? I believe, and this is also part of my teaching, that getting to know how the nervous system works and getting to know how perception works in all different ranges of like human life help us designers design from how the body perceives the space. So I think that having a knowledge and seeing your client not as a Newford, so like a machine with, you know, shapes and measures, but seeing your users as living creatures that actually interact with the living environment as well, that actually we're creating ecosystems, living ecosystems. So understanding it that way changes completely the proposal, because what you're doing has an impact on the atmosphere, and the atmosphere has an impact on your people, you know. Also the size of the people, you know, so kids have a very different size compared to adults. This is a huge thing. And sensory speaking, they work completely different. Yeah. John Paul Eberhard, the person I quoted at the beginning, whose text I read, he has really interesting hypotheses on how to design different kinds of spaces. And I usually public, you know, I write about his work because I think he opened many ways that we have to follow, and we have to keep on researching on that, because I think he was right, but we have to prove it with research.
Yeah, that's super. That's a really great, nice way of seeing things. But there's also another point that I noticed that, for instance, Nations, your practice, you define your practice through organizing these different parties, dinners, cooking shows with your friends. And I wanted to ask you, no, not cooking show. I wanted to say cooking parties. That's true. Maybe a cooking show one day. Yeah, of course. Do you feel like this kind of curated public events, like precisely parties and cooking, not shows, but parties, can be the way to solve the lack of people interactions in our public spaces? Shall architects be more invested in curating this kind of activities as part of our role in society?
I think for us it's less about something curated, but actually engaging with like a festival, or so we're interested in like connecting with people and like to understand like how a festival is constructed, to ideas of like sharing food, But I think there's also for us, there's always like a thin line when it becomes the design practice itself. So I'm not, obviously, yes, this sort of events in the public really help engage with people. But the way we look at it is like we organize these things more like casual things with our friends and with people that we meet. But yeah, I think it's important to connect on a personal level and to allow people to enter a process, whether it's an architecture process or whatever process is. And I think that's what's very interesting about our profession and how it's changing. Like it's so wide that people can actually enter it. And I think yesterday on the table, this discussion was touching on that. Like we have the skill set, we have a way of looking at things and organizing people and activities that I think could be very useful for the public space of our cities. Yeah.
That's wow. Okay, and maybe just one last question for Sergio, because I really loved your presentation about the bells. As I told you before during the break, it was really inspiring.
Thanks.
To say that the thing that the history of bells as this element that paces used to pace our fix the pace of life in cities, and was this element gathering people. Could you tell us? Do you feel like nowadays we lost this the capacity that we had in the past to create this kind of elements, like this attracting elements for our public spaces? Do you believe that we should look? And if it's the case, do you believe that we should look for inspiration from in the past, in this kind of like you did, or are there also like things today that we might use in our practice to make our public spaces more attractive for people?
Well, it's a complex question. Everything has changed, of course, and now we have other links to the public space. The public space has been transformed completely. What is a public space today? No? Maybe it's virtual, maybe even it's not real, or maybe it's not in our city, maybe it's in the whole world. No? So it's so strange to think about the public space today. Probably we forget the proximity with people. No, maybe we are always thinking in other kind of operations in distance and forget even the name of our neighbor, no, or something as that. That's so complicated question of our life. If I think in the question you made before about the teaching and trying to link with this question, I feel nowadays in my pupils the necessity of connecting with reality. I explain. After theoretical years, after theoretical schools that have determined the profession of architecture during last decades or even last years, I'm assisting now to a moment where young architects, young students want to touch the material, want to touch the reality. That's fascinating for us because we have built a world with no material, with no materiality, with other kind of structures or links, not based in the material. But it's really interesting how they are completely surprising when you organize a workshop to build something basically like a wall with stones. I think they are the most popular activities in a school of architecture today. So we have to think about that. About the public space, I think it's the same question. Our public spaces years ago has the names of, for example, the activities they have. We have the Plaza del Carbón, Plaza de la Cebada, Plaza del Mercado, Market Square, or coal square or something as that. Nowadays they have no names, they have no activities, they are a neutral space where everything could happen. That is good, but that also is bad. We have no program for our public space. Everything is for everything. No? So maybe we have to balance these two positions. Of course, we have to make our public space more democracy. Yesterday, we assist to the presentation of the British Pavilion about that question. But of course, I think our public space have to have some personality also, because this personality, this function will probably is defined by the people that use that space. No? I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely, more than enough.
The way we're sitting, and it's not being able to look at someone, and I think the one of the reasons why we have made the circular and kind of carpety, and everybody had to lounge because and taking off shoes, and so even this condition where we could all sit together at an eye level where we can discuss that kind of physicality or the architectural design conditions and space, how we create it really affects how we engage. I think this is a way that kind of gets into the reality. So I'm kind of looking at. Yes.
I was just thinking of social interaction. Like, of course, like right now we're sitting like that, so I cannot have social interaction with them. So that's why it's called a round table, because usually they're round. I mean, this is the setup we've got, but it's answered to the question and following with Simon said, like there is a link between the space we're in and how we interact with each other, not only with the space. So I think like taking that into account, and everything has changed, but we're same human beings, and from Homo sapiens we haven't changed that much, although we think we have, but we're like forest creatures.
Okay, it seems like a perfect conclusion to our discussion, but maybe there are some other questions from the public. We're more than welcome to hear some questions. Oh, there's one.
And comments, please.
This Biennale in particular was kind of extraordinary because of when it happened. The thing that I found really inspiring about working in the Korean Pavilion is that it was already anticipating kind of crisis in a way by engaging with existing crises. And I think anybody functioning in the world right now can sometimes feel kind of overwhelmed by the number of crises that we are facing, particularly if you work in the field of architecture, right? Where you have to ask an ethical question every time you build anything new, like, how do we justify this in this moment? And I actually wanted to ask about the role of optimism in your work, because it seems like there's a common thread in a lot of the projects that have been presented here, that there's a sort of a critical but kind of optimistic outlook. So I wanted to ask you, how important is optimism to your practice and to your teaching?
My answer is really quick, so maybe I can. Shall I start? I think it's key. I mean, teachers and human beings, I always say that we have to spread serotonin and dopamine everywhere we are, because, you know, I think happiness is what supports everything, because not being optimistic destroys. And not only because we're architects, but because we're human beings, I think it's good to construct and build the tangible and the intangible. So optimism, it's key. And it's actually spreading optimism. It brings more optimism, and makes it better and better. And I think that we have to support each other. So if you see someone who's being negative because there is this crisis or this is not going well, we can try to see the positive aspect of it. So I think it's fundamental. So thank you for bringing it up. Because, yeah. And what's your name? Sorry. Anna. Like me. Look at that. Thank you.
I don't know if the word optimism is the the appropriate word. I think as architects and how we are dealing with complex situations, we are trained and also forced in one way, and it is that optimism or resilience to look at when we have these problems, we are challenged and we get like, oh, we have this brief, and overcoming that brief to a kind of more creative way of, not a solution, but a way forward. And I think that's something that was inherent in me, or in all the curators and architects who were involved in the Biennale. And that made us kind of be really creative on the next steps as we go along with what was happening throughout the time. So that kind of sequence of also knowing that planning and kind of envisioning and imagination, that we know that that imagination in some ways will manifest once you put it out there. And that what we put out there was something of, the question of how will we live together, which was already a kind of quite a live with well together. That was the kind of question, right? So in our way, that was really amazing also for me to see all these very creative ways of seeing that.
So maybe enthusiasm?
I mean, I think
enthusiasm maybe.
It's an optimism, yes. It's a positive outlook, I guess. Instead of being, what was actually the reasons why we said we're going to do this future school under these very kind of sensitive topic was we keep repeating the stupidity and complaining about it, and by complaining about it, things that we are solving it, but we are not solving anything by complaining about it. That was my kind of simple response.
I think optimism also has the connotation that it doesn't involve being like critical or taking a stance. So I definitely agree that we obviously we operate within the realm of having awareness and critique on some sort of work, but I think without optimism or some sort of vision or maybe even a stupid, naive belief, nothing will actually move or happen. So,
in my case, we spend a lot of time making architecture. So if we are not optimistic, it's really a bad business. No, I think in our profession has a mission to make a better world that we found. I think we have illusion to make that. The illusion is the motor of the research also. When we project, when we make architecture, we are researching. Research not is only a question about academical matters. It's a question about making a project. That's the way of in that architects make research. So I think the illusion, as an adventurer, an explorer, the illusion of this optimistic character is that it allows us to find results, to follow the questions we are searching answer. No? Sometimes very difficult. Sometimes we have to go to a forest and cut the trees and searching for that answer. So probably the optimism is the motor we have to search.
Last question, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentations, and this discussion is fascinating. I've really enjoyed the past 2 days. I think partly just hearing this very international dialogue. I think all too often we're kind of in our own silos at home, both within our industries, also within our countries, and there's been something really special about hearing these international conversations. We're all kind of grappling with uncertainty in some way. We're all broaching this question of how will we live together, but approaching it in a different way. And I was just wondering, I suppose, what you've learned from one another tonight. You know, how what have you been surprised by, I suppose, from the discussion this evening? But also any ideas about how we can continue to break these silos and encourage more of these kind of discussions that bridge both academia, practice, that bridge different countries, different cultures.
I think we should hear from the audience more. What have you learned? I think for me it was just making the trip and being here and say, okay, this is important to engage and this time of, I wish that we had this time of 15 minutes to all the pavilions and all the participants, and really this is like such a valuable resource that we share and we can adapt, and I was really amazed by how little I knew also by visiting and being so busy with running it, and we have this research body of work that would continue, I think, to somehow exchange and make it into realized projects in a way, yeah?
Yeah, I think reaching out and really collaborating, not... I think there's so much richness that can come out from a conversation. That, yes, especially like as we're used to the context of London and something which feels like an immovable rock. To come here and to see something much broader as a picture, it's a much more optimistic way of looking at what we're doing. And yeah, I think reaching out and really trying to work between us, I think the CC is an amazing kind of framework for collaborations that are emerging to emerge. Yeah.
And thank you so much for your exposés, for your answers, for your debate. There's another question. There's another question. Go for it.
Comments.
This is not a question, first of all. Thank you very much for the presentations, and thank you all for the questions. There are a few memories from this afternoon that are very strong to me. I have learned from all of you, and I have realized there is this picture of a tent in a ruin or a place that could be something very interesting later. There is this table made out of the materials we have nearby. We have this optimism. We have this what we are learning from each other. And that is basically what I'm seeing, because I'm quite young, the beginning of any dream of any friend, of any architect, of any project. Like many of what I have around are just founded on that, and that's how all this starts. It starts by learning to live together in a tent, learning to make a table, and just be optimistic, plan, learn from whoever you're meeting on this way, and just, I don't know how to sum up this because it's just an impression of this evening. But I like to thank you because you have more experience, and I realize that's what we are encountering.
And all this was possible because there's always this, I was surprised that they were not speaking about the curation of the Spanish pavilion, although the participants were present and presenting the work, which was, I think, if I had the choice, I would have brought my participants and exhibitors to present instead of me talking about it, and that would have been also amazing. So all this was possible because there are people who are like facilitating and making this possible from the scene. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for your words. And thank you, all of you, for being here this evening. It's been a blast. We want to congratulate the architects because they have just won, like, they are going to be exhibited at VIAU. And, you know, thank you very much to all our speakers and to the audience. We hope this will repeat again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.